Gerald and Betsy seemed like the perfect couple, but behind closed doors, their secret night of passion set off a chain of betrayal, manipulation, and shocking revelations that would shatter their family forever. The house at the end of Maple Street was the kind that caught the eye of anyone passing by. Its white walls gleamed in the sunlight, and the garden was always perfectly trimmed, full of colorful flowers that seemed to smile at the world. To the neighbors, Gerald and Betsy appeared to live an ideal life. Gerald, a successful businessman, was known for his calm demeanor and polite manners. He carried himself with a confidence that made people trust him immediately. Betsy, his wife, was admired for her charm and elegance. She had a way of walking into a room and lighting it up with her presence, and everyone around her seemed drawn to her warmth. Together they seemed like the perfect couple. Inside the house, the scene was just as picturesque. The furniture was expensive but tastefully chosen, and every corner was immaculate, as if nothing had ever been out of place. There was a quiet, orderly rhythm to their days, and to the casual observer, it seemed that happiness flowed naturally in the household. But appearances, Emily had long learned, could be deceiving. Emily had lived in this house for almost 3 years, and while she appreciated the comfort it offered, she could not shake a persistent unease. She had learned to watch quietly, to observe the interactions between her father and stepmother. On the surface they treated each other politely, even lovingly, but there was something beneath the surface, an energy she could not name. Sometimes late at night she would hear muffled laughter coming from the living room, sharp and quick, followed by the sudden hush of voices. She never dared to peek, but the sounds lingered in her mind, planting seeds of doubt and curiosity. Despite the unease, there was a comfort in the predictability of the house. Meals were always served on time, chores were expected to be done promptly, and bedtime routines were consistent. Emily clung to this order as a shield, a way to feel safe amidst the uncertainty of adult emotions she could not yet understand. Yet, even within this safety, the shadow of something sinister loomed. There were nights when the house felt colder than it should, when the air seemed thick with unspoken secrets. Emily would lie awake in her room, staring at the ceiling, and feel the weight of invisible eyes watching, judging, or perhaps waiting. It was during these nights that she realized life was rarely as perfect as it seemed, and that sometimes the most dangerous truths hid in plain sight, behind the smile of a parent or the grace of a stepmother. The storm had begun just as evening fell, rain streaking the windows in thick, uneven sheets and wind rattling the corners of the old house. Gerald's car rolled into the driveway later than usual, the headlights cutting through the darkness before disappearing behind the front door. Inside, the house felt unusually still, almost oppressive, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Betsy moved quietly through the living room, her movements sharp and tense, glancing at her phone every few seconds as if expecting an urgent message. The flicker of worry in her eyes was unmistakable, though she quickly masked it with her usual composed expression. Emily, sitting on her bed with a book open in her lap, could feel the tension seeping through the walls. It was a heavy, suffocating presence that made her skin crawl, even though she told herself it was just the storm outside. From her vantage point in her bedroom, Emily noticed the way shadows stretched unnaturally across the furniture, bending and twisting with the flicker of lightning outside. The familiar house suddenly seemed alien, every corner harboring potential secrets. She could hear the muffled sounds of footsteps from the living room, hesitant and careful, as if the adults were aware of her presence, but chose to ignore it. The rhythmic tapping of rain against the windows was the only constant, a relentless reminder of the storm raging both outside and, she suspected, within the walls of her home. Something about that night felt different. It was not just the weather or the late hour. It was the sense that the ordinary rules of their family life had been suspended, leaving space for things that should never exist in a home. Emily's curiosity grew, despite the unease twisting in her stomach. She had learned over time that her father and stepmother had layers she could never fully penetrate, but tonight, the atmosphere seemed to promise revelations she was not ready for. Every creak of the floorboards, every sudden gust of wind, seemed amplified, as if the house itself was warning her to stay away. Yet she could not tear her eyes from the slightly open door of the living room, the space where shadows moved with a life of their own. Something was happening behind that door, something that made the blood in her veins run cold with anticipation. The storm outside intensified, rattling the windows with violent gusts of wind, while inside, the living room remained a theater of secrets. Emily could hear snippets of movement, a chair dragged across the floor, a quiet sigh, the soft rustle of fabric. Her mind raced with possibilities, but she pushed them aside, knowing that trying to understand adults' actions often led to more confusion than clarity. Still, she felt drawn to the room, an invisible magnet pulling her closer to the truth she was not yet ready to face. As the night deepened, the house seemed to shrink around her, pressing in with shadows that whispered of betrayal and hidden desire. Emily stayed still, gripping the edge of her bed, aware that the events unfolding in the room below could change everything. She felt like a silent witness to a world she had never been allowed to enter, a world where innocence clashed with secrecy, and every choice carried consequences too heavy for her to bear. That night, the storm outside mirrored the storm inside the house, a night that would linger in Emily's memory forever, marking the first time she truly sensed that her family's perfect facade was fragile and that the world she thought she knew could crumble in a single evening. The night had grown darker, the storm outside turning the world into a blur of shadows and rain. Inside, Gerald and Betsy moved through the house with a cautious intensity, as if every step carried a secret that could shatter their carefully constructed lives. Behind closed doors, Gerald and Betsy were no longer just husband and wife. In the dim light of the living room, their actions revealed desires that had been suppressed for years, a reckless passion that neither of them could resist. Their movements were hurried, furtive, as if the walls themselves were capable of betrayal. Every glance, every touch, carried the weight of secrecy, a dangerous knowledge that if discovered, could destroy not only their relationship but the entire family. Emily could not see them, but she sensed the shift in the house, a vibration that ran through the floorboards and echoed in her chest. The faint click of a door locking, the soft rustle of fabric, the almost imperceptible sighs, all of it hinted at a world she had never known, a world of adult decisions and indiscretions that felt forbidden yet magnetic. She struggled to reconcile the parents she knew with the ones she now imagined in the shadows, acting on impulses that were hidden from the light of day. The stark contrast between appearance and reality gnawed at her, leaving her mind restless and fearful. As the night wore on, the secrecy intensified. Betsy's voice, though low, carried a tone of command that Gerald could not resist, a subtle dominance that had never been part of their public life. Gerald, usually composed and in control, now moved under her influence, drawn by a force he could neither explain nor resist. Their hidden actions became a dangerous dance, each step threatening to expose them to the one person who might ruin everything. In her bedroom, Emily's heart raced as she realized the depth of the betrayal, though she did not yet have the full picture. The knowledge that her family's perfect image was a lie filled her with a chilling mixture of curiosity and dread. The house seemed alive that night, every creak and shadow amplifying the tension. Outside, the storm raged with renewed fury, as if nature itself recognized the sins unfolding within the walls. Inside, Gerald and Betsy were caught in a world of desire and secrecy, oblivious to the potential consequences. Emily, still hidden, felt the first true pangs of fear for the life she had known. She realized that the night was more than just a fleeting mistake. It was the beginning of a chain of events that could unravel everything. By the time the clock ticked past midnight, the storm had passed, but the atmosphere in the house remained heavy, suffused with unspoken guilt and dangerous secrets. Emily understood that nothing would ever be the same again. The night's hidden acts had changed everything, leaving a lingering tension that would haunt the family, a reminder that behind closed doors, the truth is often far darker than anyone can imagine. The discovery began innocently enough. Emily had been searching for an old homework file when she stumbled upon Gerald's laptop, left unlocked in the study. What she found made her stomach twist with disbelief. Hidden among innocuous documents were messages, photographs, and digital traces that painted a shocking picture of her father and Betsy. A picture of betrayal she had never imagined. The messages were deliberate, intimate, and unmistakable. Emily felt her hands tremble as she scrolled through them, each new piece of evidence adding weight to the realization that the life she had known was nothing more than a carefully maintained facade. Her mind raced as she pieced together fragments of the puzzle. The photographs showed moments of closeness that were meant to be private, while the messages revealed a plan of secrecy and deceit. Emily's heart pounded, not only with fear but with an overwhelming sense of betrayal. The people she had trusted most, her father and her stepmother, were living a life hidden from her, a life that contradicted everything they had told her. The innocence she had once clung to in this house seemed fragile and distant now, shattered by evidence she could neither ignore nor fully comprehend. Emily felt trapped between fear and curiosity. The house, usually a sanctuary, now seemed hostile. Every creak of the floorboards, a potential signal of discovery. Her every movement was cautious, careful not to alert the adults to the fact that she had uncovered their secret. Yet, even in hiding, she could not stop herself from examining every detail, every word, every photograph. The more she saw, the more she realized how complex and dangerous the situation had become. Her father and stepmother were not just hiding an affair, they were living in a world of manipulation and risk, one that could ripple outwards and destroy everything Emily had ever known. As the night deepened, Emily's sense of isolation grew. She had no one to confide in, no trusted adult to help her process the revelation. The weight of the secret settled heavily on her shoulders, pressing down with a force that made it hard to breathe. She understood that even a single misstep could expose her knowledge, placing her in a precarious position she was far too young to navigate. Every shadow seemed to move with intent, every whisper of wind outside the window a reminder that the house was no longer safe. By the early hours of the morning, Emily made a silent promise to herself. She would watch, she would wait, and she would learn everything she could before anyone realized her discovery. The knowledge she had gained that night would shape her perception of her family forever. She understood, with a clarity that both terrified and empowered her, that she had become an unexpected witness to a betrayal that could shatter the fragile illusion of perfection they had maintained for so long. Emily, watching from the sidelines, sensed the shift almost immediately. There was a different energy in the house, one that went beyond the uneasy tension of the night before. Betsy's movements were deliberate, her expressions carefully measured, and Gerald's usual composure seemed forced, as if he were acting under pressure rather than choice. Emily noticed the tiny details, the way Betsy left notes in places Gerald would find, the subtle rearrangement of objects that suggested planning rather than accident. Every small act seemed to serve a larger, unseen purpose, and Emily's fear of the unknown grew with each passing hour. The plan that Betsy and Gerald had begun to weave was cunning and insidious. Betsy's demands extended beyond secrecy. She wanted assurance, leverage, and control. She maneuvered conversations to test Gerald's compliance, pushing boundaries in ways that made him increasingly complicit. Gerald, struggling with shame and desire, found himself agreeing to actions he had never imagined he would take, trapped by Betsy's persistence and his own inability to resist her influence. The night's affair had evolved into a calculated power struggle, one that Emily, though young, could perceive with alarming clarity. The house itself seemed to respond to the tension. Shadows stretched long across the walls, the sunlight filtering through the windows only emphasizing the cracks in the family's carefully maintained image. Emily could feel the weight of the secret pressing on her, a suffocating presence that followed her from room to room. Even in the kitchen, the simplest interactions between her father and stepmother carried undertones of strategy and manipulation. Words that sounded ordinary on the surface were charged with hidden meaning, and Emily became painfully aware of how easily trust could be twisted into a tool for control. As the day wore on, the danger of the plan became more apparent. Betsy was meticulous, considering not only her own desires, but the potential consequences of exposure. She crafted alibis, arranged distractions, and monitored the household as if she were a general commanding a battlefield. Gerald, increasingly weary, struggled to reconcile his love for his family with the dangerous path Betsy was leading them down. Emily, observing silently, understood that the choices made in these hours could ripple outward, affecting everyone in ways that might never be repaired. By evening, it was clear that the night's events had set into motion a series of deliberate actions that would shape the family's future. The affair was no longer a fleeting mistake, but a calculated sequence of manipulations, each step carrying potential for chaos. Emily felt the tension settle into her bones, a deep awareness that she had become a silent witness to a dangerous game. The house, once a sanctuary, now held a charged energy, a reminder that when desire and control intersect, the consequences can be as unpredictable as they are destructive. The days following that fateful night were filled with subtle changes, the kind that could easily be overlooked by anyone not paying close attention. At first glance, the house seemed unchanged. Meals were served on time, the floors remained spotless, and Betsy's smiles retained their practiced warmth. But for Emily, the changes were undeniable. She noticed the way Gerald's gaze lingered too long on his phone, the slight tightness in his jaw when Betsy approached, and the unusual pauses in their conversations. Every glance, every gesture, seemed to carry hidden meaning. The atmosphere in the house had shifted, and the weight of secrecy pressed down on her chest like a stone. Betsy, aware that their actions could no longer remain completely hidden, began to adjust her behavior. She maintained her charming public persona, greeting neighbors with polite enthusiasm and hosting gatherings with a smile that never faltered. The consequences of that sinful night began to emerge in unexpected ways. Friends of the family noticed changes in Betsy's behavior, an unusual defensiveness, fleeting moments of anger, and a new insistence on secrecy. Questions were asked, though politely and without confrontation, yet the undercurrent of suspicion grew stronger with every whispered remark. Emily began to see the first hints of how fragile the illusion of perfection truly was. The seemingly flawless image of her family was beginning to crumble, piece by piece, revealing the imperfections that had always lurked beneath the surface. Even the smallest details became significant in this tense environment. A misplaced object on a shelf, a message left open on a laptop, or a shadow moving too quickly across a wall took on enormous meaning. Emily's awareness sharpened, her senses attuned to the slightest disruption in the household's rhythm. She realized that what had once been ordinary could now signal disaster. Every footstep, every murmur, carried the potential to expose secrets that could ruin their lives. The tension in the house was no longer just emotional, it had become a physical presence, suffocating and unyielding, shaping every interaction and decision. Emily felt the isolation more strongly than ever. She had no one to turn to, no confidant who could understand the burden she now carried. The knowledge of her father and stepmother's betrayal weighed heavily, creating a constant undercurrent of fear. She could not predict what would happen next, only observe, learn, and wait. The house itself seemed to conspire with the secret, each shadow and creaking floorboard amplifying her unease. By the end of the week, Emily understood that the sinful night had set off a chain reaction. The family's carefully maintained facade was cracking, and there was no turning back. The consequences were not yet fully visible, but they loomed like a storm on the horizon, threatening to engulf everyone in its path. Emily realized with a chilling clarity that the perfect life she had once known was gone forever, replaced by a tense, unpredictable world where secrets could destroy everything in an instant. Emily had always known that secrets existed in her house, but she had never anticipated discovering one that could shake her to the core. It started innocently enough. As a quiet evening in her room, when she decided to organize her father's old desk, her hands brushed against a hidden compartment at the back, and a small leather-bound journal fell into her lap. The cover was worn, the pages thick with ink, and the moment she opened it, a wave of realization swept over her. What she held in her hands was not just a diary, it was a meticulous record of Betsy and Gerald's hidden life. A detailed account of the decisions, desires, and manipulations that had been carefully concealed from her. The revelation struck Emily with a force she could hardly comprehend. Every entry detailed steps that had been planned, meetings arranged, and private moments captured, all evidence of the dangerous game her father and stepmother had been playing behind closed doors. She realized that the night she had overheard, the storm that had rattled the house, and the tense days that followed were not isolated events. They were part of a deliberate pattern, a carefully executed plan that Betsy and Gerald had nurtured over time. The reality of their deceit was far deeper than she had imagined, and the weight of this knowledge pressed down on her like a physical force. As she read on, Emily discovered details that were more personal, more intimate, and more chilling. The journal revealed how Betsy had exerted control over Gerald, using his weaknesses to ensure compliance while maintaining the illusion of affection. The entries also detailed the steps taken to conceal their actions from the rest of the world, from carefully staged social appearances to small manipulations that made the home feel ordinary, despite the chaos simmering beneath the surface. Emily began to understand the full scope of what had happened. The affair was not just a fleeting mistake, it was a calculated, deliberate manipulation that threatened the stability of the entire family. By the time Emily closed the journal, exhaustion and fear weighed heavily on her. She had uncovered the truth, but the knowledge brought no relief. Only the realization that nothing would ever be the same again. The people she had trusted most had built a secret world that existed alongside the one she thought she knew, and now she was trapped in the middle, an unwilling witness to their deception. Emily understood with chilling clarity that the line between love, betrayal, and destruction had been crossed, and that her family's image of perfection was now nothing more than a fragile illusion, ready to shatter at any moment. The days that followed the revelation felt heavier than anything Emily had ever experienced. The house, once a sanctuary of warmth and familiarity, now felt like a cage filled with secrets too large to contain. Gerald moved through his days with a quiet tension, his once confident demeanor replaced by a distracted, uneasy presence. Betsy, still maintaining her polished exterior, seemed sharper, more deliberate in every interaction, as if she were carefully orchestrating a reality that no one else could fully perceive. The household carried the weight of unspoken truths, and Emily could feel it in every corner, the lingering shadows, the subtle silences, the charged energy that pulsed through the walls. Emily struggled to reconcile what she had discovered with the memories she had of her father and stepmother. The journal had stripped away the illusion of a perfect family, exposing a reality filled with manipulation, secrecy, and betrayal. The father she had trusted, who had tucked her in at night and reassured her during storms, was now someone who could be complicit in acts that shattered the foundation of their household. Betsy, once admired by neighbors and friends for her charm, had become a figure of cunning control, capable of bending everyone around her to her will. Emily's world, once simple and predictable, had grown chaotic and unpredictable, leaving her constantly on edge. Outside the house, whispers began to circulate among friends and neighbors. Betsy's slight changes in behavior, once subtle, were now noticeable to those who knew the family well. People questioned things quietly, their observations like small cracks forming in a wall of perfection. Gerald's distracted manner did not go unnoticed either, and though no one confronted him directly, the sense of suspicion grew steadily. Emily observed it all with a mixture of fear and resignation, realizing that the family's private chaos was beginning to spill into the public sphere. Their carefully maintained facade was slowly eroding, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Within the house, tension simmered constantly. Meals were eaten in silence, small interactions felt weighted with meaning, and every glance between Gerald and Betsy carried a history Emily could no longer ignore. The power dynamics that Betsy had established left Gerald increasingly withdrawn, and Emily became painfully aware of how far their home had drifted from warmth and trust. The house, once a place of safety, now felt like a stage for performances of civility, hiding the fractures that ran deep beneath the surface. By the end of the week, Emily realized that life would never return to the way it had been. The revelation of that sinful night, the journal, and the manipulations had altered everything. Trust had been destroyed, innocence lost, and the image of perfection that the family had projected to the outside world had been irrevocably shattered. Emily understood that the consequences of that night would continue to ripple outward, touching every aspect of their lives.